Today, 13th, 2026, June. The radar screens deep inside the Pentagon's underground command centers flickered with urgent alerts as 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers sliced through the night sky over the Indian Ocean. Their massive payloads locked onto coordinates buried beneath the mountains of central Iran. In the early hours of June 22, 2025, something unprecedented unfolded. 22nd your times.
The tension between Iran and America is reaching a whole new level, and the world is divided. But the real question is, who do you stand with? America has official live voting open right now to see where the public support lies. If you love America and want to show your support, go to the description or the pinned comment right now. If you are using an Android, click the Android link, and if you are on an iPhone, click the iOS link. Just complete the quick 1-minute verification to make your vote count officially, and let's show the strength of America. Go vote now.
American forces executed Operation Midnight Hammer, a coordinated strike that sent 14 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators hurtling toward Iran's most fortified nuclear sites, Fordo and Natanz, while Tomahawk cruise missiles from a submerged Ohio-class submarine hammered Isfahan. The underground fortress at Fordo, carved into a mountainside and protected by layers of rock and reinforced concrete designed to withstand almost anything short of a nuclear blast, suddenly faced the only conventional weapon on Earth built specifically to reach it. What governments had long feared in private briefings was now exploding into reality. Iranian air defenses, already strained from prior Israeli operations, lit up with frantic attempts to track the invisible intruders. But the B-2's stealth technology rendered them ghosts in the machine. Each 30,000-pound GBU-57, a precision-guided behemoth of high-density steel alloy, accelerated downward with devastating kinetic energy, engineered to tunnel through up to 200 feet of earth or 60 feet of reinforced concrete before detonating its 5,000-pound warhead. Multiple strikes funneled down ventilation shafts at Fordo, 6 bombs per hole, creating a cascading seismic effect that military analysts later described as turning the facility's depths into a collapsing tomb of rubble and contaminated centrifuges. The silence from Tehran in those first critical minutes spoke volumes. No immediate retaliation, no public admission of the scale of the breach. Just the raw shock of a red line crossed that shifted the entire balance of power in the Middle East. That silence immediately alarmed naval planners monitoring the Strait of Hormuz. Commercial satellite imagery from hours earlier had already shown Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps speedboats repositioning near key choke points, but the strike's success raised new questions about how deeply Iran's underground networks had truly been compromised. Fordo wasn't just another enrichment site. It was the crown jewel of Iran's hardened program, buried to survive airstrikes and capable of producing weapons-grade uranium in relative safety. The GBU-57's debut in combat dropped from B-2S that had flown non-stop from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri with multiple aerial refuelings, exposed vulnerabilities in even the most protected facilities. Defense officials in Washington had spent years refining the massive ordnance penetrator precisely for this scenario, testing it against simulated mountain complexes because intelligence assessments painted Fordo as the ultimate test case. Now, with battle damage reports filtering in, the implications rippled outward. Iran's stockpile of highly enriched uranium, estimated around 400 kilograms at 60% purity according to open-source tracking, remained largely unremoved before the hits, raising fears of localized contamination, but also confirming the program's setback. And if you are finding value in this detailed breakdown of how one operation reshaped global deterrence, make sure to subscribe to OK Samu for more unfiltered frontline analysis. The real danger wasn't just the physical destruction, it was the signal sent to every adversary with buried assets, from North Korea's mountain tunnels to China's underground bases. Planners in Beijing and Moscow watched closely as the United States demonstrated the ability to project power across continents with stealth bombers carrying payloads that no other nation could match in conventional terms. The operation involved over 125 aircraft in support roles, precision-guided munitions totaling around 75, and flawless integration between air and sea assets. Yet contradictions emerged almost immediately in public statements. While U.S. officials declared the sites obliterated and Iran's nuclear ambitions destroyed, leaked assessments and satellite imagery suggested severe damage but not total annihilation, delaying the program by months to perhaps 2 years rather than ending it outright. That gap between rhetoric and reality fueled institutional fears in Allied capitals about escalation cycles that could spiral beyond control. Satellite observations over the following days revealed unexpected shifts. Tanker traffic in the Gulf began rerouting cautiously, insurance premiums for vessels transiting Hormuz spiked overnight, and energy markets registered the first tremors of potential supply disruptions even as Iranian officials downplayed the strikes as superficial. The interconnected web of global energy flows meant that a strike on buried centrifuges thousands of miles inland directly pressured European LNG alternatives and Asian importers already navigating South China Sea tensions. In Ukraine, where Russian forces continued grinding advances, the ripple effect on oil prices offered Moscow a temporary economic buffer, but strained its own logistics if broader sanctions followed. U.S.-China dynamics entered a new phase of quiet recalibration, with Pentagon analysts noting increased activity around Taiwan Strait patrols as Beijing sought to project strength amid Washington's demonstrated willingness to act decisively on proliferation threats. The strike didn't occur in isolation. It layered onto years of shadow conflicts, proxy maneuvers, and intelligence operations that had brought the region to this flashpoint. What terrified energy traders was not merely the immediate blast radius, but the possibility that Iranian retaliation could close Hormuz entirely, choking off nearly 20% of global oil transit. Military movements accelerated in response. Arleigh Burke-class destroyers repositioned closer to critical lanes. Virginia-class submarines maintained silent vigils, and Aegis-equipped ships heightened their radar sweeps for incoming drone swarms or anti-ship missiles. Inside Iranian command bunkers, the pressure mounted on IRGC leadership to respond without triggering full-scale war, a delicate balance that exposed fractures in their decision-making. Selective leaks from open-source intelligence communities began surfacing details of the B-2 flight paths and fuse configurations, revealing how the weapons were programmed for sequential detonations to deepen penetration. One bomb might not suffice against ultra-hardened targets, but multiple hits in the same shaft created a drilling effect that overwhelmed even Fordo's mountain protections. This tactical innovation deepened global military understanding of modern deep strike doctrine, forcing adversaries to rethink their entire hardening strategies. Then the radar screens lit up again in the days that followed, not with new attacks, but with the electronic signatures of Iranian countermeasures. Shahed drone networks mobilized for potential swarm saturation, while coastal missile batteries along the Gulf tested their launch sequences. The real nightmare scenario involved one wrong identification, an overloaded radar mistaking a commercial flight for an incoming threat, or electronic warfare interference blinding command nodes. Governments privately feared exactly these accidents, which is why public messaging stayed measured even as military posture hardened. NATO allies in Europe grappled with the economic fallout, higher energy costs threatening to reignite inflation, just as Ukraine aid packages faced renewed scrutiny. In the Kremlin, assessments highlighted how U.S. success in Iran could embolden similar operations elsewhere, yet Russia's own entanglement limited direct involvement. China, meanwhile, accelerated its own underground facility protections, drawing lessons from the GBU-57's performance against concrete and rock. That silence from certain quarters was not accidental. Allies who typically voiced strong support remained unusually quiet in initial hours, weighing the risks of broader entanglement against the strategic gain of degrading Iran's nuclear timeline. Intelligence agencies like the Mossad and CIA had long shared data on Fordo's layout, including its centrifuge halls and ventilation vulnerabilities, but the decision to deploy the MOP marked a threshold crossing. The bomb itself, developed over years with input from the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, represented a pinnacle of American engineering tailored for one primary adversary scenario. Its GPS and inertial guidance allowed pinpoint accuracy even through contested airspace, while the casing's material science enabled it to survive the immense forces of deep penetration. Post-strike analysis awaited full battle damage assessments, but preliminary reports indicated enormous damage to underground halls, with seismic sensors registering the internal disruptions. This shifted viewers' understanding of what air power could achieve in an era of hardened targets, exposing the limits of passive defenses when faced with specialized munitions. But the real pressure point was somewhere else entirely. Economic consequences unfolded rapidly as oil benchmarks climbed. LNG shipments to Europe faced delays, and global supply chains adjusted to heightened risk premiums. In the South China Sea, U.S. Navy assets increased presence, a subtle reminder that commitments elsewhere did not diminish focus on Pacific deterrence. Ukrainian forces, monitoring Russian resupply lines, noted potential shifts in Moscow's energy leverage if Gulf instability persisted. The strike interconnected these theaters in ways that defied simple regional framing. Hidden deployments of additional THAAD batteries and Patriot systems in the Gulf underscored institutional fears of retaliatory missile barrages overwhelming air defenses. Drone operations by Iranian proxies added layers of tactical vulnerability, with misidentified tankers posing constant risks of accidental escalation. Military planners were no longer solely focused on victory conditions. They tracked escalation ladders meticulously, seeking to prevent uncontrolled spirals while maintaining pressure. Commercial imagery analysts working through open-source platforms revealed troop movements near remaining Iranian facilities, logistics corridors straining under the weight of dispersal efforts. The timing of the operation, following Israeli strikes that had already degraded surface elements at Natanz and Isfahan, raised suspicions of coordinated sequencing designed to maximize cumulative effect. What happened next worried defense officials across multiple capitals. Iran threatened closure of Hormuz and asymmetric responses through its network of militias, yet the measured pace suggested awareness of the costs. Propaganda campaigns ramped up on both sides, with Tehran broadcasting images of limited damage while Western intelligence highlighted centrifuge destruction. These contradictions between official narratives and visible satellite evidence highlighted the information warfare dimension, where selective leaks served to shape perceptions without full disclosure. The audience should constantly feel the hidden systems colliding here, governments maneuvering behind layers of classification and public posturing. Deepening the military understanding further, the B-2's long-range mission highlighted logistical mastery. Flying over 30 hours with refuelings, the fleet demonstrated unparalleled global reach for such a sensitive payload. Each bomber could carry 2 MOPs, explaining the distribution across 7 aircraft for the 14 dropped. Tomahawk salvos complemented by targeting surface infrastructure and air defenses at Isfahan, preventing rapid reconstitution. This combined arms approach exposed vulnerabilities in Iran's integrated air defense system, already tested in prior exchanges. Electronic warfare played a silent but critical role, jamming radars and disrupting command links during the critical window. The psychological impact on Iranian leadership could not be overstated. Bunker discussions reportedly intensified around retaliation options that avoided direct U.S. confrontation, yet signaled resolve, a tightrope walk fraught with danger. Markets reacted before politicians could fully brief, underscoring how economic signals often precede official acknowledgments in these crises. And if you are finding value in this unfolding analysis of strategic shifts that continue to define our world, subscribe to the Oksamu channel for premium breakdowns you won't find elsewhere. The situation's fluidity became apparent as follow-on assessments trickled out. While U.S. claims emphasized obliteration, independent reviews and IAEA monitoring pointed to significant but repairable setbacks in some areas, with enriched material dispersal remaining a concern. This ambiguity deepened uncertainties around future proliferation risks. In the broader geopolitical system, the strike pressured alliances. European nations weighed energy security against support for further operations, while U.S.-China competition intensified over technology export controls that could hinder Iran's reconstitution efforts. Naval shadowing in the Gulf increased, with unidentified contacts prompting heightened alerts. The real danger lay in miscalculation, where a drone swarm or mine-laying operation could trigger chain reactions beyond any single actor's control. Satellite systems continued feeding data on reconstruction attempts near the sites, with IRGC units dispersing assets into new tunnels and decoy locations. This cat-and-mouse dynamic revealed strategic deception at play. forcing intelligence agencies to expend resources on verification. Economic shocks manifested in higher defense budgets across the region, straining resources already committed to Ukraine and potential Taiwan contingencies. The operation's success validated years of investment in bunker-busting technology, but also invited countermeasures, such as deeper burying or active defenses like advanced surface-to-air systems. Command pressure mounted on U.S. forces to maintain readiness for secondary strikes if Iran accelerated covert programs elsewhere. Political panic surfaced in Tehran as internal factions debated responses, with hardliners pushing aggressive postures and pragmatists urging restraint to preserve regime stability. These institutional dynamics explained the selective quiet from some allies who feared being drawn into wider conflict. Tactical movements in the following weeks underscored the tension. U.S. carrier strike groups adjusted positions to cover multiple scenarios, while Russian naval assets in the Mediterranean showed increased activity as a show of solidarity. The Strait of Hormuz remained the ultimate vulnerability, where even limited disruptions could cascade into global recessionary pressures. Open-source analysts pieced together timelines from flight tracking and seismic data, exposing details governments preferred to keep obscured. The GBU-57's performance data, once classified, now informed worldwide defense planning, shifting understandings of what constitutes an impregnable fortress in the 21st century. Unanswered questions lingered about the fate of specific warhead components and whether dispersed stockpiles could accelerate a breakout timeline despite the damage. This created ongoing suspense, with each new imagery release potentially altering threat assessments. Military imagery from the strikes showed precision impacts that minimized collateral while maximizing effect on hardened targets, a testament to evolving doctrine. Yet micro-tensions persisted, including risks of cyber disruptions to command networks or delayed responses in overloaded systems. The interconnected nature meant Hormuz instability could indirectly bolster Russian positions in Ukraine by diverting Western attention and resources. China-Taiwan flashpoints gained new context as demonstrations of long-range strike capabilities prompted Beijing to accelerate anti-access strategies. The strike changed calculations across the board, exposing how one decisive action reverberates through global power structures. Governments lost maneuvering room as public expectations hardened around containing proliferation. Escalation remained possible at every turn, from proxy actions to direct exchanges, keeping planners awake over potential blind spots in satellite coverage or communication breakdown. What unfolded in the months after further complicated the picture. Reports of additional U.S. and Israeli operations targeting remaining infrastructure highlighted the campaign's extension, with underground facilities continuing as focal points. Energy markets stabilized somewhat, but with elevated baselines, reflecting persistent risks. Intelligence interpretation emphasized Iran's resilience, its ability to rebuild through covert networks despite setbacks. This resilience introduced new strategic dangers, as desperation could breed innovation in asymmetric warfare. Alliance pressures tested NATO cohesion, with differing views on engagement levels. The psychological toll on decision-makers, balancing deterrence with de-escalation, revealed the human element behind high-stakes choices. Viewers of these events sensed the thriller-like unfolding, where each development hinted at deeper layers yet to surface. The operation's legacy lay in its demonstration that even the deepest fortresses have calculable limits when confronted with tailored capabilities. Drone models and missile systems on both sides saw heightened readiness, with Shahed variants potentially repurposed for retaliatory waves. Battlefield changes around key sites included fortified perimeters and dispersal, complicating future targeting. Shipping reroutes became normalized, adding costs that burdened global trade. The narrative of controlled escalation masked underlying fears of uncontrolled drift toward wider conflict. Political leaders delayed certain announcements, allowing markets and militaries to adjust first. This sequencing exposed contradictions in public versus private risk assessments. As open-source discoveries continued revealing operational details, the sense of hidden motives emerging grew stronger. The crisis evolved, with vulnerabilities persisting in logistics corridors and early warning systems. Everything felt part of one destabilizing strategic system, where pressure increased daily and systems adapted under duress. The chilling reality is that this situation remains far from resolved. New tunnels, dispersed programs, and evolving alliances suggest the underground threat persists in mutated form. Governments continue monitoring for signs of reconstitution, while military innovations race to counter them. The strike that changed everything did so by redrawing lines of acceptable risk, yet left the world grappling with the consequences of that shift. Hidden deployments, selective intelligence, and economic undercurrents ensure the tension endures. What comes next could redefine power balances anew, with each actor maneuvering amid uncertainty and the constant shadow of potential escalation. The systems collide still, and the danger behind the headlines only deepens with time. The situation remains fluid, and sources are open source.